diagnostics is just putting us into record mode. So if you don't want to appear in the video recording, then please switch off your video camera. But without further ado, I think we are going to get cracking. So a very warm welcome. I'm Andrew Dakers, CEO of West London Business and a member of the Brent Business Board. And I've been working in the environmental sustainability space for some 20 years. So it's an issue and a set of challenges very close to my heart. Brent Council and West London Business have worked in partnership to develop this series of 5 webinars, each looking at sustainability in a different sector. And today, the spotlight falls on the media and creative sector. This is part of our shared ambition to support local businesses to go green. The key aim for the webinar today is to provide practical advice for going green in a way that helps businesses to survive and thrive. The low carbon circular economy is an economy that minimises waste and negative impacts on the climate. We already have over 850 businesses in the borough involved in the low carbon circular economy, and we're striving to build on this. We know that there are calls from local consumers, local residents for this shift to happen, and there are key benefits for businesses that make this move. As will be explored in today's webinar, and I have to say very sadly, this is the 5th and final webinar in the series, going green can help improve performance, drive innovation, and reduce costs. On the housekeeping front, I must remind everyone to please keep your microphones on mute if you're not speaking. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions of our panelists at the end. So please post any questions in the chat function and we'll come to these during the Q&A. You can also, when we get to the Q&A, put up your virtual hand, which I think you'll find at the bottom of the delegates list to ask a question. The slides and key resources will be, of course, shared with everyone after the event. So onto our agenda for today. We have a fantastic lineup for you. I'm going to hand over in just a moment to Councillor Shama Tatler, who's going to do a bit more scene setting on the borough's ambitions. We're going to hear this afternoon from 2 very locally rooted businesses, from Shilpa, first of all, of the House of Billamoria, and Sally from Green Kit. So we're going to get a perspective on a sort of fashion and textiles and sort of retail business, and then also a business that's in the vast supply chain really to the West London TV and film sector. And then we're going to have Amelia Price sort of sandwiched in between our 2 case studies, giving us a sort of broader perspective on the opportunities that come with making this transition in any business. But Amelia's particular area of expertise is the film sector, which should, I think, set us up nicely for hearing from Sally as to what's happening on the front line in her business. So that will take us through to 3:40. Then we have the opportunity for hopefully lots of questions from everyone, and then we'll come to a close at 4. So that's our next hour. But without further ado, let me please pass over to Councillor Tatler for some further introduction.
Thank you, Andrew, and welcome to everyone who's joined us today. And it's great to see you here, and particularly with the creative and media sectors being talked about and examined today, especially as Brent was the Borough of Culture last year, and all difficulty is we couldn't do anything in person, but we had a lot of online events through the culture year. So we'd like to continue to build on that and working with great businesses and within the creative and media sectors. So I'm Councillor Shama Tatler. I'm the Cabinet Member for Regeneration, Property and Planning, and it's great to see us working in collaboration with West London Business, but also thinking about how we look at recovery in Brent, and that's partly to do with how we look at sustainability and obviously climate emergency. And we're really proud that we're looking at these sorts of webinars to support business to be able to do that. So in July 2019, Brent Council declared a climate and ecological emergency and committed to do all we could in our power to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030. Despite the uncertainty of the past year, we know one thing: climate change is still coming, and it is coming fast. And we cannot lose sight for the need for all of us as individuals and as businesses to act and avoid catastrophe, but also reboot our economic recovery from COVID-19 to be more environmentally sustainable, green and fair. And it's really an important ambition for Brent. We're in the process of finalising our climate and emergency strategy for the next 10 years. This strategy has been shaped by a year of engagement with our residents and businesses. And some of the core objectives within our strategy are built around supporting the transition to a low carbon circular economy model, and also supporting our businesses to go green and reduce the carbon footprint of throughout all their operations, including their supply chains if possible. We know that the last year has been very challenging for many of our businesses, and we hope that these webinars can give some practical advice for going green in these ways that can also benefit your businesses, but also to help you survive and thrive in these difficult times. An example of what things that we're doing is trying to encourage more people to shop local and shop with small businesses within the borough, and kind of look at how they can become more active and rather than using their cars and vehicles to go to places, but go more local. We'd also like to encourage you as businesses to join our Brent Environmental Network, which will be a key mechanism to encourage collaboration, sharing information and open up dialogue around climate action with Brent residents, businesses and organisations. It'll also be used to alert you of any opportunities, funding and tips that you can use to implement to reduce your business's environmental impact. You can sign up free through the Brent Council website. And obviously, I think Maddie will also share links in the chat as well. We'd also like to encourage you to sign up to the Brent Business e-newsletter, which I got mine today, which will keep you up to date with the latest business news, events and updates. And it goes out to over 8,000 businesses alone already. So I really encourage you to sign up to that, and we'll have lots of information and contacts there. Both links will be put up on the chat. So thank you very much again to our speakers this evening. Thank you to Andrew for hosting and Maddie for organising. But I look forward to hearing the discussions going forward and encourage everyone to go green. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. As I said, we've got a packed hour, so I'm going to hand over straight away to Shilpa for your introduction to the House of Bilimoria and all the amazing things that you've been doing. So over to you, and I think you're going to bring up some slides on the screen.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for having me. I am excited about sharing about House of Bilimoria. I will just get this presentation up. Here we go. Is that good? Can everyone see that?
That's great. That's great.
Perfect. Okay. So welcome to my space. This is the House of Bilimoria. My name is Shilpa Bilimoria, and we established House of Bilimoria in 2008. We are an ethical, sustainable fashion brand. What we do is we take secondhand, heirloom and vintage textiles and we transform them, give them a brand new life and put them back into people's wardrobes and into their homes with a circular economy model in mind. Our humble roots come from my grandfathers who were tailors. I'm very, very passionate about the ethics of the industry because I had a lineage that worked in the industry. It skipped a generation, namely probably because of fast fashion issues and people not putting value against workmanship, craftsmanship and cloth. So I became totally passionate about sharing the whole making side of clothing and the history behind the textiles and teaching people also how to value their items, repairing, making them last longer. I do workshops as well. So there's a lot of things capsulated there. What I've done today is I've brought to you some slides that are going to kind of take you through the key points of our business model that have us operate in a sustainable manner, are making sure that we don't add to the waste that's being created by the fashion industry, because it was one of the most polluting industries that there is on this planet, and we're very, very conscious of that. So with that, I'm going to pop right off into the next slide. So our ethos, so it's rooted in sustainability, which comes from upcycling. As Councillor Tatler mentioned, she actually dropped some old saris and things off to me yesterday. And this is a lot of how we operate. We take secondhand heirloom vintage materials and we essentially save them from landfill because we give them a new life. We bring them into a modern context, into the day-to-day, and have them easy to wear, and we weave them into people's lifestyles. So we talk a lot about personal and individual style. Our customers go on a big journey when they come to us. So this is something I will share as we move on throughout here. Our ethics, so all of our production is done in-house by our team that's either in-house or at the moment partly home-based because of the obvious working conditions and things, and all paid living wages. We don't have any of our production done overseas. None of that happens. So we don't have anything flown in purposely for us and things. Everything is done with materials we have in hand here. And then most of our customers come to us directly. So we are mainly a B2C company. And then community is at the heart of what I do as well. I'm so passionate about community, about sharing the skills with young people. You'll often find me at, say, like the International Women's Day events in Brent and things. So I'm very passionate about this sense of community that Councillor Tatler mentioned about shopping local, about opening our doors locally and creating this creative community where we are. Because I think that this whole kind of a little bit of a village atmosphere, that is something really to be prized with, and it creates and generates individuals as well. So we're talking about sustainability of the planet and going green, but being fair and also looking at sustaining people, I think is very important in that at the same time. So that's a bit about our ethos. And next, I'm just going to go on to a bit about closing the loop. So what we have is something called the Reincarnation Program. So a question that I just posed to businesses is that what happens to your product once your customers are done with them? If it's a product or service, how is your loop closed? Is it a closed loop that you're dealing with? So just showing that you're responsible for the lifetime of that product. What we have is a reincarnation program. So what happens, what you're looking at on the screen is one of our upcycled children's wear pieces. And we know that kids go through their clothes very, very quickly. What we have in place is a scheme by where the customer purchases the item and then they can bring that back to us when the person is done wearing it. We will then either refurbish that item, so repair anything, put it through some cleaning and things, and then sorry, I just had some feedback there. And then we'll upcycle that again. So we'll either break that down even further and perhaps make it down into, a small little clutch purse or something like that, or we will just refurbish and put that out there. The customer then gets a 30% off voucher for the next item. So there's an incentive for them to bring that item back. We are making sure that our items are not going to end up in landfill after that, and we can close that loop. We can decide where the product will end instead of the customer being the one that has to be responsible for that. So we put that out there. That comes with every single item that we sell. Yes, and then the customer journey. So the next thing I just want to talk through that we are passionate about is the whole experience with our customers. So we meet a lot of our customers in-house, which we did before the pandemic. So that's been a bit different for the last year. But what we look at is how our customers interact with their purchase. So all of our branding, our stickers, our business cards are all printed on recycled paper, and they can still be recycled. So what you'll see, that tissue paper behind that lovely purse that's been upcycled from a vintage sari is recycled tissue paper that can be recycled again. The picture in the middle, we've got our biodegradable packaging. So you receive that and that will just decompose. And you can use that, they can use that package again. So it's got 2 sticky strips so that they can reuse that. And then once the second use is done, you can then that's going to decompose if you dispose of that correctly, the tissue paper and the card again. And then the third one is my most favorite thing so far, and which is a recent, that we've done that in the last year, is having that QR code in our items. So those labels now have a QR code that if the customer scans that, it takes you right back to our website, that takes you to our aftercare page that will tell you how to take care of your item. And you'll also be able to direct yourself to that reincarnation program through that. So what we like to make sure is our customer has several touch points with their product that all come round and close that loop and keep them engaged with this ethos of sustainability, of the ethics, of the whole brand experience. So it's about putting that value into your products, into your services, and making an asset of that. Because often there are things like the packaging and the stickers and that are slightly more expensive than your ones that you'd get that aren't, but that we can feed that back into the value that we have with our customers, comes back tenfold. So yeah, that was my little bit about how we build sustainability into our products, into our services. And yes, if we have any questions, I guess that's coming towards the end.
Thank you so much, Shilpa. No, really inspiring start to the afternoon's session. I've got loads of questions I'd like to fire away, but I'm going to bite my tongue for a while longer. As next up, we have Amelia Price, who I think again has some slides that she may be switching in. So we'll let you get yourself set up as we shift the spotlight from fashion and textiles and retail over to the world of film and TV, which is also so much a part of our local economy. So over to you, Amelia.
Hi. Firstly, hopefully everyone can see my screen okay, and apologies, I do have a back to school cold, not me back to school, obviously kids back to school, and the germs are flying around already, so that's nice. So apologies for any sniffling as I go along. Firstly, thank you as well. Thank you for inviting me on the panel, and I also have so many sort of questions and things to talk to Shilpa about. You've really you've hit the nail on the head. So many businesses that I sort of try and work with. I'm like, yes, this is what we need to do. And I love all the detail and everything that you're doing. And that's sort of a lot of the stuff I try and bring to the film industry, which obviously is very different in the way we do things, and have our own challenges, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit about as well. Firstly, a little bit about me. I started my career in the film industry about 20 years ago, and started off mainly assisting producers and actors and directors, and then went into the production office and spent quite a few years working my way up through the ranks of production on various sort of lower budget TV and film, and then progressed and kind of got into the larger film industry, and then got to the point of being production coordinator. Did that for a few years and went, I'd like to have children. And realised that the 14-15 hour days weren't really going to fit in with nursery hours. So had a bit of a switch up and moved into location coordinating, which some people would have sort of gone, well, that's slightly madness as well, but actually it gave me a little bit of flexibility in terms of the hours that I worked. So one of the things I'm quite passionate about with sustainability is sustaining people and how we work. And one of the things I noticed many years ago was how many women we were losing within the film industry because they'd hit the age of having children and then just kind of go, I don't know how I continue this. So I sort of like to think of myself at times as a little bit of a trailblazer by saying I'm going to leave at 5 o'clock, and if I need to do some work in the evening to catch up, I'll do it. It worked for a little bit. Some people were very supportive, and I ended up having a sort of team of people that I'd work with regularly, and then other people were not so supportive, and I did lose jobs based on people saying they wanted someone in the office after 5 o'clock and things. So luckily, I like to think those are the sort of things that make you a little bit stronger and give you a bit of more drive to do the things that you want to do. And that also sort of tied in neatly in my move across to locations was based on my general love of buildings and planets and the being out in the sort of out in the environment and in the wilds, as it were, that you quite often get to do on location shoots. Sustainability has been something that I've been very passionate about from a very, very young age. I used to make recycled paper when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and my grandmother had solar panels in her roof in the 70s. So it's something that's always been close to my heart. And then I moved into locations thinking, this is great, I'll be out in the fresh air a lot more, and then realized actually all I saw was the vast quantities of waste left over by film crew and the destruction that can be caused on some of the larger shoots. So after a couple of years of doing that and sort of having got the children thing out the way, I sort of went, right, enough's enough. I've turned down location coordinating jobs and I retrained in sustainability. I'm an IEMA member, and this is what I do permanently now. And thankfully it's something I've really, really enjoy, and it's a great mix of my skills from being on film sets over the years to my passion of saving the planet and trying to sort of win hearts and minds. So I'm now working with a sort of a mixture of film productions and TV productions, and also suppliers to the film industry, which with my locations background is also something I feel quite passionate about, and that whole supply chain. And when I'm working with film crew, one of the things I like to reiterate to them is that responsibility that they have of where they're buying things from and who they're hiring, which I think Sally will probably touch on quite a lot, because they're Green Kit are a really good example of a company who are doing exactly what they should be doing and have a sustainability policy in place and things. Unfortunately, not every single sort of company within the supply chain, as it were, for the film industry works to that same standard. And I think often crew don't realise they have a responsibility to ask those questions, basically. So let me just move on. Oops, sorry. There we go. So some of our challenges, I think I've touched on them already. One of the main challenges that we find a lot on film sets specifically is the lack of recycling sometimes, because it was definitely one of the much larger scale feature films that I did, and it was quite a brutal shoot, and basically we had the conversation about recycling at the start of the job and decided it was just going to be too hard, so we didn't do it and everything went to landfill. And that was one of those moments I was just like, we can't do this anymore. It's crazy, because whilst recycling isn't necessarily one of the biggest impacts on your carbon footprint, I think it's like a gateway drug, and it's a really good way of getting people to kind of get that mindset. And in that sort of same vein, we have a real reliance on single-use items. And again, these things are slowly changing in the industry, but they are still issues. And unfortunately, COVID has kind of sort of brought up, I think we've made quite a big sort of wins in the single-use plastics, where now sadly we have to go back to that. But I'm sort of trying to be positive and hopeful that actually it's short-term, and people have also learnt a lot during COVID and lockdown. So yes, they might have to use the odd plastic bottle when they're out and about, but actually they'll be doing other things which will have a greater impact. One of the bigger issues we have in the film industry, in the way that film productions and TV productions are set up, is we suffer a lot with short-term thinking, because people will often be thrown together to work together for 3 or 4 months, sometimes longer on the bigger features. But there's no need for them to think further or think about the industry as a whole and how it works together to sort of share the resources, because that's not in their remit. They can only control they are going to be responsible for the next 3 months, and then they will leave that job and move on to something totally different. So there's a lot of stuff that Shilpa was talking about with the circular economy and the way that works brilliantly with everything that she's doing, but it's translating those sort of things into the film industry, where the way to get that to work is for people to collaborate overall, which is a bit of a struggle when you've got competing businesses and different people with different ideas, which is also one of the things that's great about the film industry, but it does sort of bring a few challenges. Lack of crew engagement is something that I'd like to think again. When I started this a couple of years ago, I used to spend a lot of time talking to people about how we had 10 years at that point until we were going to hit 1.5 degrees above global warming. And it was more about explaining to people why we needed to do these things. Whereas I'd like to think now, particularly over the last year, people are a lot more engaged with the subject and actually just want the practical tools to go, okay, what can I do about this? I know there's a problem, so I don't need to spend the whole time sort of schooling people on what climate change is, which is nice. It's refreshing and positive. So next, we have sort of the challenges that will then filter out not just from productions and on set onto businesses as a whole and the film and TV industry as a whole. We do have a bit of an issue with how the public view is not helped by Harvey Weinstein, amongst others. Air quality is something that keeps coming up at the moment. The generators on streets issue is something I'm having a lot of conversations about at the moment, because film crew, particularly the larger scale productions, will have 18 ton trucks all lined up on the streets to do a shoot, and there'll be however many generators they need to facilitate that, which sometimes can be 8, 9 or 10 of them, and they are large, and some of them are running on renewable diesel. That's the product called HVO, which is a fuel that's being used a lot more, and actually there's been quite a lot of uptake on that. And there's some battery technology coming in, which is exciting, but there's nothing quite to respond to the need, the power need that a film set has at the moment. So we've noticed a lot of the London boroughs are starting to get more complaints from residents about generators being parked outside their windows and things. So that obviously air quality is a big issue for everybody at the moment. So it's another challenge that the sector as a whole needs to look at. And again, our sort of time and budget constraints, which sort of feeds into whatever thing else that we've been talking about up until now, is the short-termism, and also the fact that particularly with COVID, I know COVID's taken an awful lot of money away from film budgets, particularly the films that were set up before COVID, because now they've got to find money for that. So the first thing to go is the sustainability things, because people still see it as a more expensive option, unfortunately, which is not always the case, which is actually not my second point on this slide, which is the positive things, in that there is the potential to save money. And when I sort of try and give examples in these cases, and things like the makeup department will use packets and packets and packets of wet wipes, which at the moment is probably a necessary evil, but actually there's these amazing things called a flannel, or they're, for my kids, they're branded as a cheeky wipe. They're things that we've been doing for years, but we've sort of got out of the habit, and actually we can bring a lot of that stuff back. And yes, it might be a slightly more expensive upfront cost, but actually long term you save an awful lot of money. Sustainability from business generally is really good for improving your brand awareness and image, particularly as people are more engaged with the subject. They want to be part of the journey of the products they're buying, and they want to know where products are made now and who's making them, and that they are making responsible choices. So to sort of sign your business up to being a sustainable business as well will only pay dividends in the way that you work with your customers and your engagement with them. And similarly with the employee engagement, if you are a brand that really values your employees and the people, and pay living wages and support them and allow for people to do flexible working and understand that they have lives outside of it, then you'll become a business that people want to work for, which again means that you're going to attract better talent, which is only ever going to be a good thing for your brand. So my sort of quick business wins, I guess, are switch to renewable energy. It makes such a big difference to your carbon footprint. It's really easy to do, and good energy, Ecotricity, some of them are really, really kind of doing an awful lot of work, and it's quite simple to do. So that's one of the biggest change for your carbon footprint. Second is to measure your carbon footprint, which is a really simple way you can bring people in to do it for you, or you can do it. There's plenty of websites to do it yourself, and it's a really good way to kind of look at the different aspects of your business and where your biggest impact is. And then engaging with your suppliers, it's so important to look at every part of your supply chain, and again through that becoming a sustainable leader. Make your business lead by example, and when you're working with your suppliers, going, we're doing this and we expect that from you, and then you will also raise the game, if you like, from other suppliers. And I think that's my time up. So
Amelia, thank you so much. Lots of snippets of new information there, but equally sort of reinforcing various messages that we've heard in some of the previous seminars, which is, I think, productive too, in sort of focusing our minds on some of those key actions that, frankly, any business can and should be taking today. So, finally, before we come back to both you and Shilpa, I'm sure with lots of questions. We're going to turn to Sally to hear GreenKit's story, which is, of course, part of the jigsaw puzzle of the complex industry that is TV and film. So over to you, Sally.
Hi, can everybody hear me and see my screen?
We can.
First of all, I need to apologise for the strange noise in the background. I'm afraid that's my dog snoring.
Brilliant.
Which is one of the disadvantages of work. Thank you very much for inviting me to do this. I'm really interested in this whole issue, and it's fantastic to hear everybody else's perspectives on how they treat sustainability in their business. GreenKit has been going for about 10 years. We're a lighting film rental company, and we specialise in providing LED powered film lights to people making commercials, short films, videos, all across the content really. And we decided very early on that sustainability had to be one of our USPs, and in fact it was the reason that we started the business. My husband did an MBA, and his thesis was on and investigating awareness of environmental issues in the film industry. And at that point, there was a lot of enthusiasm and very few ways in which people felt they could take this forward. So LED lighting was at an early stage. People were quite nervous of it. And so the sustainability commitment has grown alongside the business. One of the things that I found really helpful when we first started is we started off with an environmental policy, which at that point was very basic. But for us, it helped focus our priorities and to make sure that sustainability was at the heart of what we do. So at GreenKit, we take our responsibility to the environment very seriously. We're committed to providing the best selection of environmentally friendly equipment to our customers. That means we don't bring on board every single LED light. We're very picky about which lights we bring. And we really have to be confident they'll do the job for our customers better than the traditional alternatives. And we also want this commitment to be reflected in the way we run our business. So we're very bossy with employees about how they behave. Sustainability is one of the things that we look at when we look at their appraisals at the end of each year. And we are always looking for new ways to make the business more sustainable. We'll lead by example, encourage customers, suppliers and stakeholders to prioritise environmentally friendly working practices. So the first tip would be really, if you can, start with an environmental policy, even if it's just one page, about what you want to do, and try and make that visible and share that with everybody in your supply chain and everybody that works with you, so that they understand that you are starting on this journey, and it is very much a journey. This next slide I've chosen to call Riding the Sustainability Wave. First of all, it is a wave now. It feels like it's a movement that's gaining momentum. I think COVID has focused people's minds on how important it is to think long term, to work with community like Shilpa was saying, to really look after each other and to make collaborative decisions about how we can build a much more sustainable society. But the other thing about it is it does feel very overwhelming. There's so much information out there. There's so many businesses who say they're going green. It's very difficult to kind of separate the chat from what's actually happening. So I just wanted to share with you some of the practical ways, really sort of small things we do to try and make it sustainability central to our whole business. And as Shilpa was saying, and Amelia, it reiterated this, it comes down to the way that you work with what you bring into the business, thinking about at the point that you buy something, what's going to happen to it at the end of its life. So the first thing we always say, whether it's about new equipment or whether it's about something to use in the office, do we actually need it? Is there something that we have already that would do the job? Can we use something else? repair it, add something to it, change it and make that work. If we do need it, where does it come from? How far does it have to travel? It's difficult with lighting technology because there isn't much made in the UK, but there are examples. A very good battery company called Hawkswood that makes their batteries in Kent. They also have a system whereby they take old batteries back for refurbishment, and that's the kind of company we really want to work with where we can. And then the other thing is, how long does it last? Quite often we spend a bit more money on our lights than some of the competitors do, but we try and make sure, particularly because we're a rental business, that light can go out reliably to clients, delivering exactly what they want again and again and again, come back, be repaired, do it again. And for us, it's really important, because people in the industry are still nervous of these new technologies. If they use a light and it doesn't work or it's not reliable, it's their professional reputation on the line, and they're not going to come back to us, and they're not going to feel that LEDs can support them in their journey. Then how we use things like eco-tank printers are definitely more expensive than cheaper printers, but you not only save a ton of money by not having to buy ink refills, you also save a ton of plastic waste, which also has metal in it, which makes it very difficult to recycle. So that's one of the things. Rechargeable batteries, obviously, as Amelia said, green electricity, and then really, really simple stuff like we've got notices all over the office that say turn the lights off. All the computers are set up to power down and the printers to power down if they're not being used. We've swapped the fluoro lights in the ceiling of our warehouse for LED panels that use an awful lot less electricity. We have to show everybody that comes into the business that sustainability is in our life, in our blood. It happens in everything we do. And then again, really simple ways that we reuse things. There's no single-use plastic in the kitchen. We wash crockery and cutlery. We cut up cloth that we can no longer use on set, and we make it into rags and we use it to clean things. All these are things that our grandmothers knew, and some of it we seem to have forgotten. And a couple of years ago, we made a decision. We made some branded coffee cups, and then last year, some branded water bottles that we give out to customers to use on set. And obviously those are reusable tools for them, but they also get our name out there. Someone seeing Green Kit, when they walk past, it's a really good investment, and it's been extremely popular. All our paper is shredded and used as packaging. We buy our office furniture secondhand. We're not fussy about what it looks like. It just needs to do the job. So it's really just a question about thinking about the end of life of something before we buy it. And then we donate. If something's working and it's old, you don't need it anymore. Charities can refurbish computer equipment and donate it to schools or other places that need it. Some things can be broken down into parts. We have a huge kind of bin of spare bits in the warehouse that we use to mend other bits with, which is one of the things we can do with electrical equipment. And then obviously you can compost either through the council system or at home. Food waste. We have a separated recycling collection, which we measure. And then the final thing we do, if we know we can't get rid of something, and every business will have this problem, we are in the process of establishing a carbon footprinting amount, so we already offset the emissions from our vehicles, but we plan to offset the waste that we generate from the business. Now, obviously, last year was a funny year because we weren't open for some of the year, so we're kind of starting now that we're back to work to see how much we can get rid of. We plan to reduce that every year. So really what I would say to everybody is to remember that this is not a destination, it's a journey, and everyone is at a different point on the journey. And some people have more things that they control in their business than others. So I think it's really important to just, as Amelia said, take a breath, start from where you are, work out which things you can control, which things you can change easily, and pick one thing. I just say something small that you know you can do, and just do it today. Talk to your employees, talk to your suppliers, talk to your customer about what it is, get everybody involved. It's, use social media to advertise it, talk about it. And when something works for you, we are really lucky. We've got a team of really young, enthusiastic people who also work on film sets. But they still need to be reminded that, you know, sandwich packaging isn't a great thing when it's a mixture of cardboard and plastic. So we really try and bring everybody in. One of them is a sustainability champion. It's part of his job description. And we always talk about things we've done well, but we also talk about things we can't do. We rent our building. We're not in control of the insulation in our building. We're not always in control of the ways it's heated. There are things like that that, given the situation we're in as a small business in Brent or anywhere, we're not going to be able to change, but that's okay. I think you need to find something that you know you can change and be honest about what you can't. And then once you've done one thing, put that on the list, put it up on a poster, tell everyone about it, pick something else and do it again. And that would be my takeaway. Just keep going, do something, but do it today.
Sally, absolutely awe-inspiring, and once again, lots of questions I want to be firing your way. Just to remind everyone, as we move into the sort of Q&A of this afternoon's session, that you've got the chat window, so please sort of post any questions to our panelists there. Or indeed put up your virtual hand, use the raise hand icon, and I can then bring you in to ask us a question orally. So I'll be keeping my eye on those windows to my right. Shilpa, I think you've received some very positive feedback from what I can see in the chat window about your QR code innovation. And so I think I'm going to, as you've been on pause for a while, I'm going to put my first question to Shilpa, and that is, I suppose, you know, you clearly very passionate about what you're doing and have very values sort of based business, but you're sat in a wider industry that, you know, we're all probably one way or another continuing to consume from, alongside perhaps some of our more responsible, ethical purchases. What's your take on what needs to happen in the wider industry? What's your advice to customers when, like me, they scratch their head as to whether they should be shopping from perhaps some of the more controversial brands that are out there?
Yeah, this is a question I get asked a lot. My advice is always buy less, buy quality, choose well, and ask a few key questions. I think fashion, the industry looks this way, not because of people, everyone loves a bargain. Who doesn't love a bargain, right? But I think that what is key is that not being aware. So the customers are not aware of what their pound, let's say, is actually buying into, because I do believe that with that pound, you're voting for a certain way of being, something that's happening with the client, something that's happening with people around the planet. And I think that it just takes a few questions. Where was this made? How was it made? And how many, like, what is the supply chain behind that? And a lot of companies couldn't give you the answers of where that starts. So I think that those are the key things. There are so many amazing sustainable brands out there.
Well, I was going to say, where do you see glimmers of hope? Where should we be? Aside from your own business, of course, where else should we be spending our pounds?
An example is my jeans. I love denim, but I don't produce denim myself. I mean, if I upcycle some jeans and repair them, yes, but I do love a good pair of denim jeans. And so I crawled through and I did some kind of company audits myself and looked, and there's a wonderful company called Nudie Jeans. And their repair shop is actually in Soho on Barrack Street. And their jeans, you buy a pair of their jeans and they will repair them for the lifetime of the jeans for free. So you buy the one pair of jeans, they're made ethically, they're made sustainably with organic cotton, making sure they're using as little water consumption possibly as they can. And they are setting themselves up, what their bid in a sense is to be the most sustainable denim company that there is. And it's wonderful. The jeans are amazing. They don't look by any means any sort of, I think people often think with fashion, if it's going to be eco-friendly or sustainable, you're going to end up looking like you're working on a farm or something. That's not the case. They're fantastic. And they're, again, that customer journey and policy there. I can just, jump on a tube, go down to Soho and have my jeans repaired if anything happens to them. And
so with a bit of digging, you're saying we can find a range of businesses that are doing the right thing
hands down
in your sector. Well, that's encouraging, and we should focus all of our minds as we refresh our wardrobes responsibly before we get released into the outside world post pandemic. And if I now to perhaps switch the spotlight across to the sort of TV and media space, Amelia, I was intrigued with all of your sort of reflections on the steps that need to be taken on a film set, and of course the practical challenges in that sort of short time frame that that films and TV productions are coming together, as to what the view of the commissioners of these productions are. So what's the message that's filtering through from the Netflixes and Skys and BBCs of this world to the production teams, and how's that working out?
I have to be careful I don't get myself in trouble answering questions like that. I think it does vary quite a lot, actually. There's companies like Sky have done amazing things in terms of how they build their buildings. It's everything that they do, and they've supported a group called Mama Youth, who bring kids from disadvantaged backgrounds into the film industry, which is again something I'm hugely passionate about, because everybody knows we have huge problems in that area. And so Sky have been really supportive, and unfortunately not all of them are like that. I think you're always going to have good cop, bad cop, and in some ways what's become quite interesting over the last year is the movements that's happening from crew. And I think there used to be a big feeling of going, oh well, that Spark or that gaffer, that they're never going to get involved, they don't care. But actually, there's more and more films now, we're doing things like Meat Free Monday. And I still am, there's a film I'm working, or a TV production I'm working with at the moment, and they're like, oh, and all the caterers don't really want to do it. They're a bit concerned, they're going to get a lot of complaints. It's like, we've done it. People are actually quite engaged. And you know what? There's a few grips who are vegan now, so people actually don't mind that much. And I think it's just having those conversations, and from a crew point of view, they're actually starting to really push back on the broadcasters and the networks, and they're starting to ask the questions. There's a movement called Cut It, which was started by some director of photography about a year or so ago, and then kind of achieved great momentum during lockdown, as everybody didn't have quite as much to do, and they've all come together and are really pushing against the establishment, if you like, in the way that we do things. And they're it's
quite a bottom-up groundswell that you're describing.
Quite a difference.
And I suppose also it's on our radars at West London Business in this space is an initiative called Albert, which I think has come out of BAFTA. Can you tell us a little bit about how that kind of fits into the industry and what it offers?
So Albert are, like you say, run by BAFTA, and it's a carbon calculator and training service. It's brilliant. You'll start to notice every TV production in the country has to go through the Albert carbon calculator system. So you'll notice there's an Albert Green certificate of footprint at the end of most TV shows. There's also one of the sort of the big particular sort of divides, as it were, in the industry is when the American studios come and shoot over here, because they all use a system called the Green Production Guide, which was set up in the States. And it's interesting. There's a little bit of competition between the two different carbon calculators. For me, I think as long as you're using one of them, it doesn't matter which one. Albert have just launched a new calculator that works internationally and is brilliant, is really in depth. But I think coming back to what Sally was saying as well, the most important thing is that you're doing something. You shouldn't be beaten up by the fact that you're not using one or other, and you're not doing X, Y, and Z. Actually, it's the main thing, you're doing something and trying to make small changes, because it is a long-term thing. Ideally, we do everything tomorrow, but that's not possible. So I think it's important not to beat people up for doing the wrong thing.
And so as consumers, should we be feeling guilty if we get to the end of a program and don't see the Albert stamp at the end of the show, or is there hopefully something happening?
And ask why they're not doing it. But
yes, get on social media. So I'm going to turn from your big picture sort of analysis to some of the reflections that Sally was sharing in terms of the front line of the supply chain in the industry. And I think what particularly sort of piqued my interest, Sally, was you're describing of really the kind of level of detail of how you've embedded it within the organization's culture, environmental sustainability, from induction, through to job descriptions, through to staff appraisals. I wonder whether you can tell us a bit more about, how that's come into being, and how do you integrate it into a staff induction and appraisal?
Well, I think what we've tried to do is focus on practical things. So we discovered with clients, as with everybody, if you ask them whether or not they want to use environmentally friendly lights, of course they do. But when it comes down to actually making a choice, they go for their favorite light. So what we need to do is to make sustainability the given, the obvious thing, the thing that everybody does. So what we look for, what we ask people to do is basically to make a commitment when they join us to do really simple things like take public transport if they can, to bring in their own lunch, we ask everybody once a month to come up with an idea, a sustainability idea. The guys that work in the warehouse, as Amelia and anyone else in film and TV would know, there's an awful lot of single-use plastic used on set. So we a couple of them actually found the film industry use big sheets of poly that to reflect and absorb light, polystyrene sheeting basically, which gets very easily destroyed. And as you know, it just disintegrates into thousands of little bubbles. It's very difficult to get rid of. And one of our employees actually found on Instagram an alternative permanent reflector that we could use. We offer to clients as a alternative. And because these guys are out, guys and women are out on set talking to people, and they are themselves trained gaffers and sparks working with electrics on film sets, they can just say to their colleagues, oh, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? So they can influence very directly the choices that our customers make, but we ask them to kind of demonstrate to us every time we appraise them what is it they've actually done. And it's just little things like that become part of the culture.
Well, that's fantastic, really helpful. I think actually I've got a few of my colleagues at West London Business joining us today, and I think they're hopefully taking notes as to how we should be improving our own appraisal system moving forward. But what also strikes me with the story of your business, Sally, is it really does bring alive what we're passionate about, this notion that every job is a green job. It doesn't matter what you're doing, wherever you have a role to play in this in addressing this climate emergency that's in front of us.
Yeah.
Now, as we get to the top of the hour, I'm going to come back to each of you with a sort of final question, and I seem to always perhaps end up with the toughest question as we get to the top of the hour. I know you've all emphasised, I suppose, the financial savings that there are to be had in this journey, but it seems to me that there are sometimes areas where costs are perhaps inescapable as we kind of internalize perhaps some of the environmental impacts that have been outside the boundaries of our businesses previously. And I just wonder, I'm going to invite you each to reflect on that question of sort of cost, and perhaps where you think it is worth spending a little bit more in your particular business and sector to do the right things. So first of all, Shilpa, where are you having to perhaps embrace a little bit more spending?
It's definitely in the packaging and how we ship our items, how customers take our items away from us and things, because those are the most wasteful, actually, because the product, we've got our circular policy on, but they're not going to bring back the packaging. They're going to throw that away. So that's where we have spent more on that compostable packaging, on the stickers. Like your average sticker usually costs somewhere around less than 5p, but these ones cost much more than that, because the glue on the back of the sticker is not, you can't compost that, you can't recycle that, so that has got to be somewhere. So it's definitely those parts where we spent more, and we look at very creative ways, like Sally was saying about furniture. Almost everything in the studio is secondhand, almost every single thing, so this is where we kind of bring that balance in, basically. Yeah. And
I've been looking at your website, and I'd say the prices aren't cheap, but I wouldn't expect them to be, but they are broadly affordable. I'd say there's an accessibility to your range.
Yeah, and that's really because we have that B2C model. We are not putting that we're not having the wholesale margins, the retail margins go on that. We operate from our studio. We don't have premises. We do sell at the Wembley Park Market, which is just, you know, I just walk the items around. So we are very green in the sense of we're not popping up in hundreds of locations and things. So that's where we can keep that low.
Thank you. Amelia, what's your take on where a bit more money sometimes might need to be spent to do the right thing?
For me, at the moment, it's sort of to get a quick win is the changing up of fuel in all the generators that we're using on film sets. There is amazing fuel called HVO that is a drop-in fuel, and it's a 90% reduction on the carbon emissions. It's a bit more expensive than red diesel, but because of various sort of bigger problems, other fuel costs have gone through the floor, so we're never going to be able to compete with that. But it's really bad for your health if you have a crew working around generators burning diesel all day and the local environment. And so the HVO fuel, yes, it's more expensive, and it's not a long-term solution, but it's something we can do right now that makes quite a big difference to all of our working lives immediately. And then we can work on the longer term battery solutions as and when the technology becomes available.
Fantastic, and a product that I'm sure everyone's noting down and now plugging into Google to find out more about. Sally, what's your take on when to perhaps spend a little bit more?
I mean, I think for us as a small business, the sustainability's actually saved us a lot of money. It's got us further in a very competitive space because it is the thing that people know about us. And what we do is we spend more money on our rental equipment, which is sort of probably usual for a rental company because you need something that's robust and that's going to go out there. But there's a lot of shiny new toys that really are not up to the hype that people talk about. And we're really lucky because we have quite a lot of experience in the field. So we spend a lot of money on new equipment, but then we spend a lot of money on repairing it. And for us, although the individual lights might be more expensive to hire than some of the more traditional lights from our customers' perspective, they'll find when they can plug them into a domestic socket, or they can run them off battery, or they can run them off a much smaller generator. So overall, although they're paying more money for the light, they're actually not paying more money for the hire. So I think it's one of those, as Shilpa said, having fewer better things is something that applies to both business to business models and business to consumer models, and in our kind of everyday lives as well.
And I think I spotted at the very end of your slides, you mentioned offsetting. I assume potentially carbon offsetting.
Yes.
So does that mean you're doing a carbon calculation on your whole business,
Yes.
seeing what's left,
yes,
and then again investing into carbon offsets?
Yes, that's right. We've just started that process, and one of the first things we're going to do is a waste audit, which involves a lot of rubber gloves. But basically, we're going to pile up all the waste we generate for a week, weigh it, photograph it, count it, look at it, really think about how we can reduce it, and then build that into the kind of the carbon costs of our business, and try and have a carbon budget the way we'd have a sales budget or a procurement budget.
Brilliant. That sounds like a slightly different team building exercise to start tipping out
Saturday morning, I think.
I have to confess, we've just been through the process of doing our own carbon footprint at West London Business, and discovered to our horror that it was around 170 tons per annum, and the vast majority of that scope 3. So some challenging supply chain conversations to have in the weeks and months ahead.
Yeah.
As always, the hour has flown by. It's been a fascinating conversation from where I'm sat, and I have to say the whole series has been truly inspiring in the businesses that are beavering away and pioneering on this sort of green front line in London Borough of Brent. At West London Business, I'm going to allow myself a wee plug. We coordinate the West London Business Awards, and I'm hoping we're going to see many of the businesses that have participated in this series entering in the next cycle and getting recognised on that platform. As we said at the start of the hour, There is, of course, the Brent Environmental Networks newsletter that everyone can sign up for to stay in touch with the local authorities to the programme moving forwards in this race to carbon zero that we're all now on. You can also sign up for the Brent Business e-newsletter, which is a great resource. And as promised, we will be circulating the slides and the recording in follow-up to today's webinar. So that all that is left really is for me to say a huge thank you to our panel for your enthusiastic and insightful contributions this afternoon, and also to Maddie for coordinating logistics for today and right the way across the series. It's been, as I said, fascinating conversations and a resource that we hope many will be downloading on demand and tuning into for many weeks and months to come. So thank you all, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.